Hello, and welcome back to yet another episode of RPEC On Air, a podcast produced by the Retired Public Employees Council of Washington. And I'm your host, Alyssa Brady, the RPEC Project Coordinator. And it's December now. The holidays are upon us, and 2025 is upon us, which means that legislative session is upon us on January 13th. I have with me here today Laurie Weidner, RPEC's Executive Director, and we're going to talk about the pending legislative session and RPEC's priorities. Hi, Laurie. Welcome.
Thank you, Alyssa, and hi to all of our members across the state.
Hello, listeners. So let's get into it. Let's talk about this coming legislative session and start with the advocacy work that we've been doing in the interim, especially what we've got going on the last few months. There's been a lot of really big news coming out for us.
So let me start by maybe providing some framing for our members about this legislative session. So the legislative session, as Alyssa just mentioned, it's going to start on January 13th, and this is considered the long legislative session. So it's 105 days. And the legislature's main role is to approve the biennium budget, which will carry us from 2025 to 2027. Now, this is also a unique session because we have many new legislators. And we thank all of you who were involved in the RPEC PAC, who have donated funds to ensure that retiree-friendly elected officials are serving in our state legislature. So we've got lots of new members of the House. We have a fair number of new legislators who are serving in the Senate. And so it means that there are many people who will need to be educated about RPEC and our legislative priorities. And so in this long session, we have new legislators who will be learning about their roles. January typically is kind of a rocky month for those new legislators. And during the long sessions, there are many bills, hundreds and hundreds of bills that are introduced. And so only a percentage of those bills will receive hearings. And our goal will be to ensure that the bill that we are prioritizing this legislative session receives a hearing and moves through the legislative process. So now to pivot to what Alyssa just mentioned, our advocacy efforts around the Select Committee on Pension Policy. For the last roughly 13 years, RPEC has led the way to advocate for the restoration of a recurring cost of living adjustment for our retirees who are vested in Plans 1, so PERS and TERS 1 retirees. This is a priority that all of our members should care about because we stand in solidarity when retirement security is at risk. And these are some of our oldest retirees, many of whom are women who did not earn high salaries when they were working. And therefore, in retirement, many of them have much lower pensions. Their pensions have not kept pace with the cost of inflation in Washington, which is one of the highest inflationary rates in the country. And so the restoration of this recurring COLA is critically important. It's important to note that the legislature removed a recurring COLA from this population of retirees during an economic downturn. And it was one of their ways of balancing the budget, which we have been fighting ever since. We have been successful in a lot of years in getting ad hoc COLAs, and through RPEC's unique efforts, this year, the Select Committee on Pension Policy has approved language on a proposed bill that will restore the COLA in 2026 and will provide an ad hoc COLA in 2025.
Yay! So when you say proposed, for people who aren't familiar with this process, what does that mean exactly? Is it filed yet? Is it a done deal?
That is a great question. So the Select Committee on Pension Policy is kind of the gatekeeper on all things relating to our public pensions. They set
Mhm.
pension policy. They are highly regarded. The Select Committee on Pension Policy is made up, it's a bipartisan joint legislative committee. So you have Republicans and Democrats who serve.
And an
Um,
RPEC member.
and there are also members who represent different constituency groups, including we
Mhm.
have a voting member on the Select Committee on Pension Policy. So the legislation that we were uniquely behind was approved by the Select Committee. It is in draft form. It is a proposed bill for 2025. It will not become um, a, a bill that's actionable until it is filed. So pre-filing of bills began in early December and will extend through much of the month of January.
Until session or even after that?
Bill filing can occur in through session. But
Okay.
but in truth, if a bill isn't filed by the third week of January, roughly, it's pretty unlikely that it will have a hearing because there are
Mhm.
specific cutoff dates when a bill has to move out of its house of origin. So this is kind of wonky stuff, but the important thing for our members to know is that through all of your hard advocacy efforts over these many years, but in particular, the work that you've done through your chapters and in answering the calls to action from our offices here, we've had a wonderful victory, and that's this proposed bill. And we do expect it to be filed uh, sometime in January.
And what is the cutoff different for everyone, or does it depend on which committee it's going through?
So the legislature produces a cutoff calendar, and those dates are they govern the entire legislature.
Mm-hmm.
The calendar, we provide that to our members of our legislative committee, and it is available on the legislative website.
More on the legislative committee later too. That's the RPEC legislative committee. Again, for folks that are new to this, we talk about committees a lot, and so some of them are RPEC and some of them are not. So back to what we've been working on just in the last few months. RPEC members, we all did a lot of work to get this proposed bill language going. Um, let's highlight that just a little bit and talk about those mobilizations and kind of paint the picture of what that looks like and what it's going to look like in the future if we need to do mobilizations again.
One of the most important benefits of being an RPEC member is that you can become involved in the legislative process with us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can always advocate as an individual, but the benefit of being part of a union is our unified voice has greater impact when
Mm-hmm.
legislative decisions are rendered. So we mobilize our members, and I think anyone here who has been part of a union has had that experience where you have an organizer who brings people together for a rally, for example. Um, it is somewhat similar with what we do, except we're rallying towards support or opposition, depending on the situation, for the legislature. So this year, for example, we mobilized once in person. So in September, we knew that was going to be a really important meeting for the Select Committee on Pension Policy. We anticipated that there might be some proposed bill language that would be proposed. So we worked in advance to mobilize our members and also members of the Washington Education Association retired and other members of our union family. And we had more than 60 people who came to the hearing room in their RPEC t-shirts and in their WEA retired t-shirts and their other union shirts. And we sat in silent solidarity to have a strong demonstrated presence as the select committee was determining a path forward on a bill that would be uh, considered in the next legislative session. That was very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to those who were there in person, we had hundreds of retirees many of whom were our members, who signed in pro on this agenda item across the state. So taken together, we had an extremely strong, constructive presence with the legislators and other committee members who were rendering a decision about this prospective bill. We mobilized digitally, if you will, virtually, in October and in November, and those mobilizations were also highly successful. We recognize that not all of our members are in Olympia. You will have an opportunity through our legislative week in February to meet with your legislators in your legislative districts. And we do that annual event in concert with our retirees who are part of the Washington Education Association Retired, WEA Retired. So that's one way that our members can get involved. That is a type of mobilization. We will be mobilizing around specific bills. So today we're speaking at this juncture of the podcast about a bill relating to the restoration of a recurring COLA for PERS 1 and TERS 1 retirees. That bill language includes also a one-time COLA in 2025 for this same group of retirees. But there are other bills that we will support that relate to healthcare affordability and healthcare access. We know that there are bills coming forward in the legislature that relate to property tax exemptions for seniors. We anticipate bills relating to affordable housing for seniors. So it's important for our Plan 2 and Plan 3 members to know that we're standing in solidarity with our Plan 1 retirees.
Yes.
But there will be many other opportunities for our members to get involved and to mobilize with us to sign in pro on key bills. There are times we're going to ask people to sign in con on a bill. And we want to ensure that we stop legislation that can harm your retirement security, but we want to support any legislation that's going to strengthen your retirement security.
Yeah, we have a responsibility to advocate for one another, because really anyone can be on the chopping block. So just because like, oh, well, I still have my COLA, it's not going to affect me, it's fine. It's like, well, you could end up on the chopping block too. So yeah, just have to make it clear, like it's not acceptable. So yeah, there's a bill tracking process, and that is something else that we have available on the website. Is it too soon to start, to start seeing what kind of bills are available?
There is a place on the legislative website where members can go to look at pre-filed bills. It is a daunting list.
Already.
And it is not searchable. It is not searchable by topic. And so each day we pour through that list looking for any bill that might have relevancy to our legislative priorities.
The benefit of being an RPEC member.
Yes,
we do
and
the work for you.
The list of bills that we monitor, we will be monitoring that list all the way up through the end of January. So we talked earlier about certain cutoffs. The cutoff date, and the cutoff is the last day to read in committee reports in the House of Origin. So what does that mean? It means that if a bill is in a policy committee, it has to have a hearing. It needs to pass through the hearing process and that bill has to go to executive session before February 21st. So you can imagine if a bill is not introduced sometime in the first basically 3.5 weeks of the session, there's a pretty high likelihood it may not get a hearing, because there are hundreds of bills that legislators will be considering, and at least dozens, and dozens within each committee. We are most focused on the fiscal committees, but we will also be monitoring bills that come through other committees, especially any committee dealing with healthcare.
Yeah, so let's talk about the fiscal picture of Washington State next year. From what I've heard or what I understand, it might not be such a great fiscal picture. And if it's not, then could this impact us achieving our goals for this session?
The Washington State Legislature is anticipating somewhere between a $10 and $12 billion deficit over the next 4 years. The figure that I heard most recently was 11.5 billion.
So that's a lot of money, but in terms of like the state's fiscal picture, I feel like they always say there's a deficit, but is that a big one comparatively?
It is, and Governor Inslee in the last week issued communication asking state agencies to trim their budgets.
Mm,
He put in hiring freezes. There's been a moratorium on business travel. So the state agencies have been asked to trim costs wherever possible and to
yeah,
not hire new personnel. So this is the fiscal climate that is very much on the minds of the legislature as it reconvenes in January. You asked if this has an implication for the work ahead for RPEC. The answer is yes. Every bill that comes into the fiscal committees will be carefully scrutinized. Those bills generally carry with them something called a fiscal note. A fiscal note includes the projected cost to implement the bill. The bill that I spoke of a moment ago, the one dealing with the ad hoc COLA, cost of living adjustment for our PERS and TERS 1 retirees, and the recurring cost of living adjustment in 2026. Both of those provisions of this proposed Select Committee on Pension Policy bill will have a fiscal implication for the state's budget. That is why our RPEC members, regardless of what plan they're vested in, will need to join with us to join our advocacy efforts through legislative day and throughout the legislative session. Many, many organizations, RPEC among them, will be clamoring for their bills to pass through the legislature, and most of those bills will have fiscal notes. And so anything that carries a price tag, which ours will, is going to be very carefully scrutinized. And it's a hard situation for all of us to grasp, but we are competing, if you will, for the same dollars that would be allocated to public education or to disabled services. You name the cause, it's all
mm,
funded through the operating budget of the state. So there's three budgets. There's a transportation budget, a capital budget, and then the operating budget. We're competing for limited dollars within the operating budget.
okay. So potentially, but we kind of just have to take it one day at a time.
Yes.
So RPEC, our legislative priorities, they guide our advocacy work, and they will guide our advocacy work through in 2025 and 2026. So let's talk about, I had mentioned our legislative committee. So, let's talk about how those priorities are identified and the committee's role and RPEC's membership's role in identifying those priorities and coming to an agreement to finalize the document.
Yeah, I think that's it. This is really important for our members to understand. So while I recognize that there are plenty of our members who did not serve within a union when they were active, RPEC is an affiliate. We are part of AFSCME Retirees, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. So there is a retiree arm of AFSCME nationally. We are a subchapter of that organization. We are actually AFSCME Retirees Chapter 10.
Mm-hmm.
We call ourselves RPEC, Retired Public Employees Council of Washington, but we are in fact AFSCME Retirees Chapter 10. We are a union, which means we are a big democracy, and our members are the ones whose good ideas go through a very rigorous evaluation process by their peers. And so the priorities that we have in our legislative priorities document started years ago and has been refined year after year by
Mm-hmm.
members who serve on the legislative committee, which is a standing committee of RPEC. The standing committee members are appointed by the executive board, and their term extends from usually November of the year that they are appointed through the time that we have our next convention. And our
Mm-hmm.
conventions take place every other year. So those who were just appointed in November of this year will serve until September of 2026 when we have our next convention. So the legislative priorities are initially established through the legislative committee, that standing committee, and they review them at each of their meetings. After at each of these meetings, the legislative committee has an opportunity to make refinements. Any refinements are sent to our executive committee, which are the officers elected by the convention body, and then those recommendations go forward to the executive board for review and action. The board of the organization serves in lieu of our convention body in between our conventions. So they have the authority to approve the legislative priorities. But in convention years, what happens is we go through this process with the legislative priorities document. And then after it is reviewed and approved by the board, it will go on to a legislative committee that is uniquely established at convention. And they will very carefully work their way through the document, offering suggestions. The feedback on the legislative priorities document is provided by the delegates representing all of our members statewide who attend the convention in a given year. So the legislative committee that's established uniquely for convention will potentially make modifications to the legislative priorities document, and then that draft document will be sent to the convention body for action. And the convention body has the opportunity to continue to make amendments before it is ratified. And so that it's a very thorough process, and it's member driven, and members are the ones who shape our legislative priorities. And we've been really fortunate because our legislative priorities document was very thoughtfully put together over the years. And some of those priorities are very long-term policy priorities of the organization that require pretty substantial changes, for example, to our tax system. So the good news is we've got a lot of really smart visionary members in RPEC. And so truly, you know, that saying that if we appear to see further than others, it is because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Isaac Newton said that. It's certainly true with our legislative priorities document because we had giants in the past, RPEC members who had wonderful ideas and were very thoughtful in composing a document that we continue to build on and refine over all these years.
Yeah, and since there's quite a few priorities on there, the document is available again on the RPEC website. I will continue to promote it. It's a resource available. But the restoration of the Plan 1 COLA, that has been a long-standing legislative priority of RPEC. And so for folks that, again, are kind of new to this, they'll start to see a lot of the same points that we brought up here appearing in the legislative priorities in terms of what bills we're anticipating and what they're relating to and why we're looking for those things specifically.
I think that it's really important for our members to know that while today we've talked a lot about our state priorities, RPEC is representing your interests federally, and we have outlined our federal priorities. Again, these are longstanding priorities of RPEC, and I think it's important for our Plan 2 and Plan 3 members to know, all of our members to know, that we are actively involved in safeguarding the funding for Social Security, ensuring that the Social Security Administration has adequate funding and adequate staffing. We are actively working with our congressional delegation to ensure that the benefits provided through Medicare are comparable to those available through the privatized Medicare Advantage plans. We are also striving to safeguard funding for Medicare and to ensure that the retirement age remains at its current level, which is age 67 for those who were born 1960 and later. So there's a number of federal priorities that we are working on, and those have always been part of RPEC's legislative priorities, and they continue to be an important area of focus for the council office and for our legislative committee. I would encourage all of our members to familiarize yourself with that document that Alyssa talked about. It's a great one-page tool that you can print out. And if you are meeting with a member of your congressional delegation, or if you're meeting with one of your local state representatives who serves in the House or in the Senate, this is a very quick document that you can share with them that articulates what we are advocating for in the next, roughly the next 2 years.
Yeah, definitely. And, if you're planning on doing legislative week, that's a great way to get started in the lawmaking process. If you've never been part of it before, we arrange for you to meet with your legislators. You can go ahead and start studying up ahead of time and look at those and just feel more confident knowing what you're getting into and what to speak on. So, with that, we did kind of we've mentioned a few different ways that someone can get involved in the advocacy work. I've mentioned legislative week, and you've mentioned legislative week a few times. What are some other ways that a person can be involved, whether it's in person or digitally, virtually, whatever?
Let me start by just saying that we recognize that our retirees are busy, they have full lives. And the great thing about RPEC is you can plug in and engage in our advocacy work in any way that works for you. And so we will have regular calls to action that you can read about in the weekly news flash that comes out. You may receive communication from your chapter presidents, which originates from the council office, asking if you would sign in on a bill. And we'll give you very specific instructions on how to do that easily. The sign-in process for bills, we have really made it as simple as possible. It should take you less than 2 minutes to follow through. And as we mentioned earlier, when a legislator is making decisions about a particular bill, they do look at stakeholder input. They want to know if stakeholders are opposed to a bill or if they support a bill. And so we want to have as many of our members signing in as possible. The timelines for those sign-ins tend to be extremely short. We do not know when a bill will have a hearing, and sometimes the hearing is only announced with 24 hours notice. So it's really important for those of you that are digital natives that you read your email, and that you also please allow your chapters to have access to your cell phone numbers, because we do have chapters that use robocalls to engage you. So those are some ways that you can be engaged during the legislative session. We would hope that you will also reach out independently or through your chapter. Chapters do legislative advocacy as well. So your chapter may be organizing a meeting with one of your local representatives. You can take part in those meetings, and they're often held by Zoom. So if you have mobility issues, or if you live quite a distance away from perhaps the legislator's district office, there are ways that you can participate.
Yeah, it's not as scary as it sounds. Last year, I ended up doing a legislator meeting that I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't supposed to be me that was there, but the member, they weren't able to go, so it was last second, and I did it. I talked to the legislator and I told them why they need to support retirees and our priorities, and it was easy peasy. It was just a little 15-minute meeting, and turns out they were just a normal person like everybody else.
I think the other way that I agree with you, the other way that a person can really help us is to email me. They can also email the council office and just share, we call it share your story or share your testimony. It could be relative to a specific bill. It could be relative to a bill that deals with healthcare affordability, for example. We are looking for retirees, regardless of what plan they are vested in, to address the rising costs of living in Washington State and the need for a livable pension. Those kinds of pieces of information are really important for legislators as they consider the Select Committee on Pension Policy bill that I referenced with Alyssa earlier. So there's lots of ways to take part. The best way to stay informed is to participate in our weekly legislative update calls that will begin on January 17th. And they are weekly every Friday from 2 to 3 o'clock. Another great way to remain informed is to read our weekly news flash that comes out each Friday. And that's a quick read that's sent by email. Visiting our website often, because there are on the front page, you can read about our legislative activities and advocacy work. And finally, attending one of our work groups or attending one of the meetings that's being held for the legislative committee. So those are all the ways that a member can remain informed and can also engage in our legislative advocacy efforts.
Yeah, you can still participate in the meetings even if you're not appointed to the committee or the work groups. And much like so many other things, you can find the meeting schedule and the Zoom meeting links on the RPEC website. So there, we make it pretty easy for you to stay informed and to get involved. So for Legislative Week, if you haven't already, please do get registered to attend that. The deadline to register is January 10th. And the event takes place from February 3rd through the 7th. Now, that does not mean that you're going to be doing all of this work for the full week. All it looks like is Monday morning on the 3rd, we host a live training for everybody to help you get prepared for your meetings, because again, it's only 15 minutes. So you want to make your point, and so that you can be effective in such a short amount of time. So we help you with crafting your message, with talking points, and we even group you up in teams by legislative district. So you can work with the members that are in your area and coordinate your approach in your meeting of how you want to communicate with the legislator. So that's the training session that we provide, in addition to materials for it, like handouts. They'll be specific to bills that we're looking at, that we'll be talking about. And from there, you'll have a schedule from me, and it will have up to 3 meetings listed on there. Those meetings will be scheduled throughout the week. It just depends on when the legislator told me that they'll be available. So you'll get that schedule and you'll see, oh, I have a 15-minute meeting on Tuesday with my senator, and I've got 2 back-to-back meetings with my representatives on Thursday. So that's just it's just 45 minutes out of my day. Once I finish the training's 2 hours, 2.5 hours. And then after that, mark your calendars, don't miss your meetings. And yeah, so it's easy. All you have to do is go on the website and register. We pretty much do all of the work for you past that. And it's very, very important that every legislative district has representation. So we're, hitting as many legislators as possible about these issues. And just, RPEC is representing everyone across Washington state. So that's why it's important for everyone to show up for it. And, we talked about the select committee meeting in September, where we had about 60 people showed up in their RPEC shirts. That's a lot more powerful than maybe just one person showing up, because that filled the room. So you're going to be more effective with a big group that shares the same values and priorities. So again, super easy. I'm the person that you'll want to get in touch with if you have questions, or if you need help registering. Your chapter presidents or chapter leaders can also help you out with that. Many of them are already experienced and have been doing this for a while, so they're familiar. They can give you some insights of what it looks like for them to do legislative week. They might have some advice that I don't have handy here up in my brain. So yes, you can contact me though. I'm here to help you. I will help you get registered and make sure that you feel confident, and so we can get this goal across the finish line among many, many others. Again, registration deadline is January 10th. And you can reach out to us at info@rpecwa.org. It's info@rpecwa.org. Go to our website, rpecwa.org. rpecwa.org, and to get in touch with us. Laurie, is there anything else that you want to plug that people should keep their peepers peeled for coming up here, I guess, in just the next few weeks before the holidays?
I want to urge every single RPEC member to familiarize themselves with our legislative priorities. Please keep informed about the bills moving through our state legislature that impact your retirement security, your health care, and your pensions, housing, taxation, property tax. If you happen to come across a bill and you're curious about it, you can always reach out to our office. Chances are we've been looking at it and monitoring it and can provide some insights. I want to invite all of our members to attend our weekly legislative update calls, which is a great way to stay involved. And I think it's also really important that our members get involved in their local chapters. Our chapters play a really important role in strengthening relationships with our elected state officials, and you can be a part of that. It's not just for the elected officers who serve at a chapter level, it's for everyone. You know, we are a union that's powered by member participation, and there is a place for you within RPEC. If you only have a small amount of time to participate in our advocacy efforts, that's fine. If you have a lot more time on your hands and you're interested in a particular topic, we'll find a way for you to contribute. So our union is powered by you and your involvement, and we look forward to having you involved with us in the next legislative session so that we can continue to strengthen your retirement security.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much, Laurie, and everybody have a wonderful holiday season, a happy new year, and we'll talk to you next time on RPEC On Air.
Thanks, Alyssa.
Yes, of course, of course.
So has the recording stopped?
It's still going. I can pause it.